right, and welcome to So What, the Marketing Analytics and Insights live show from Trust Insights. As always, I'm Katie, joined by Chris and John. And in this week's episode, this live stream, we're going to continue to make it look like I have my act together through my personal brand. We're using my website and my assets as the example because it's pretty much a blank slate. And so last week we covered going through setting up a basic website with some of the basic, contact forms and tracking through Google Analytics. And this week we're going to continue that process. So we're going to fix up a couple of things that were left over, and we're going to start to move into a basic email newsletter and what all of that looks like. So Chris, it's all you.
All right, let's have some fun. Now, one of the things we ran into last week was the fact that your website was running on a very, very old version of PHP. The good news is that for a lot of us, if you are hosting with a even moderately reputable company, there's usually a control panel of some kind where you can change the versions of these things and get your site up to date. Here's the catch. A lot of companies will not make the migration for you automatically because some versions of PHP will actually break stuff. We were on the Marketing Over Coffee website and actually the Trust Insights website as well. We switched up to PHP 7.3 and then all of our redirects stopped working. And like, oh, that's awkward. And it turns out that there was some other things that they were doing confluent with that. So short of it is, you will have to force the change yourself, and then you have to immediately go in and make sure nothing is broken. So last week, one of the things we talked about was setting up Matomo. Matomo is an alternative to Google Analytics, and it's available as a standalone open source package. If you want to run it on your own server, you certainly can. But one of the things that they did was they created a WordPress version of it. Now, we'll see if we can, this week, get it installed. Last week, we got the warning about PHP 5.
Chris, why don't people use Matomo exclusively instead of Google Analytics?
Well, that's a really good question. There's a couple of reasons I think people might not use it. One, they don't know it exists, right? Which is probably the largest reason. And two, up until now, it was one of those things that had a fairly high technical bar of entry. Now, with it being essentially just one big honkin' WordPress plugin, it's no more difficult to use than standard WordPress. It is also another thing to admin, right? So if you've gone in and set up your Google Analytics and such, with Matomo, you now have to essentially reset it up to track the same things that you were tracking in Google Analytics. It's got its own tracking snippets. It's got its own, it has its own tag manager if you wanted to use theirs versus Google's. And the use case that we recommend for people with Matomo is you install it when you want a backup, right? If you have a mission critical website and you want a backup source of analytics in case, I don't know, Mountain View falls off into the Pacific Ocean one day, this is a good thing to have. Should it be your primary analytics system? Probably not. It's not as robust. It's not as thorough. It doesn't have any of the machine learning features that are built into Google Analytics. It doesn't have quite a sophisticated tracking model, but it's not bad. And if it's for a website like yours, Katie, which is a personal website, personal brand, it's actually good enough. Okay. If you're doing like bigger stuff, like more sophisticated tracking, that's where it really falls down.
Okay. So like if I start selling e-commerce or something through my website and I want to track it, I should probably look at having a system like Google Analytics that is more sophisticated and can do some of that attribution modeling.
Exactly. Okay. Or even just the plugin installs properly, which is, as we can see here, it completely, your website actually managed to time out. So I think this is a point at which we would say, you know what, it's probably time for you to change website hosts. We're not going to do that on this show because that's a really large project. But this is now, you get what you pay for, right? When it comes to website hosting, there's just no nice way of putting it. And you're on a not as robust plan from a different vendor, so we'll move you over to a new site. However, that does not stop us from taking additional steps to get things rolling. One of the things we want to do is set up Search Console. Were you going to say something, Katie?
Nope.
Okay.
Probably, but no.
Okay. So setting up Google Search Console, The recommended way to set up Google Search Console is at the domain level and using your DNS. Now, again, we're dealing with a kind of not robust website host that actually obscures your DNS, and you can't go edit it without like opening a customer support ticket. So we're going to actually have to use the old-fashioned way of adding a property. So let's go ahead and go to and do the URL version of the website instead. You would use domain because domain gives you way more data and information. It gives you access to all the different variations. Like if you've got subdomains, like, for example, we have marketing.trustinsights.ai. That's a subdomain, and Search Console doesn't automatically track subdomains. Okay, we have three options here. We have tag, we have Google Analytics, Google Tag Manager account. Let's keep it simple. Let's just use your Google Analytics account. And actually, nope, can't do that because you don't use that. You gotta use your Tag Manager account. The reason why I couldn't use Google Analytics is you don't have the analytics.js snippet on your site.
So I was going to ask you about that because when I was getting everything set up, I kept getting these error messages. And I'm glad we're going through this because I felt like a big bag of fail when I couldn't figure out something like Search Console. Trademark, big bag of fail.
There you go. So what's happening here is that because we're using a plugin for Google Tag Manager, it's going to format the GTM code slightly differently than if you were to copy and paste it right out of Google Tag Manager. So in this case, we may need, let's see, what's going to be the easiest way to do this? Probably the easiest way to do this is going to be to just do it by the file-based method, which is suboptimal, but it's also foolproof. So let's go ahead and upload that control file I just downloaded from their site and put it here. Okay, so we've uploaded that, and now let's verify it. Your verification file was not found in the required location. Let's see if it's actually there or not. Our file name is the file's there. The problem is that we have, and this is again another website thing. Your website is not treating www and non-www the same way.
So how do you fix that?
We have to remove the property, and we have to add the property without it.
Oh my goodness.
This is like when you buy the car from the sketchy guy down the street, and like every week you're finding another thing that doesn't work right.
Exactly. Again, a lot of people, it's one of the funny things, marketing technology is IT. At the end of the day, it is IT. And one of the things that's challenging for a lot of marketers is that they're not used to dealing with IT, right? It is its own professional field. And even though marketing technology sounds cool, it's still IT. You're still messing with servers. You're still trying to make things work. And as you can see here, there's all sorts of things that are gotchas. And this is where having actual IT people helps. Because if you're not a technologist, when you run into these errors, you're like, now what do I do?
And I think that that's a very common scenario because, you kept getting that error message that you couldn't verify the property. And, I certainly didn't know that I would have to take out the www in Search Console. Like that seems like, oh, okay, that makes a lot of sense. But how does one even go about figuring that out? And so I think you're absolutely right, Chris, that it's the IT part of marketing technology that tends to get glossed over.
Yep. Now we've got Search Console set up, but there's a critically important piece missing. We need to go back and link it in our Google Analytics account. If we don't do that, we run the risk of not getting data where we want it to be. One of the critical things with Google Analytics is that if you don't link it up, save association, then a lot of things like the queries, the the pages and stuff in Google Analytics itself are populated by Google's built-in search data, which is terrible. It's like 90% useless garbage. So never do that. Always link up your Search Console property. So now in your Google Analytics, with that linked up properly, the Search Console stuff will function correctly. Okay.
And this will tell me what keywords people are looking for that bring them to my site.
Exactly.
Like
so actually, let's take a look at that.
search.
Let's go dive in. We've got 11 clicks, which is not a lot, but it's fine.
It's, it's more than I had a week ago.
Exactly. So let's go ahead and just turn on all of our metrics. We're looking at 3 months worth of data here. And we have your name, which is good. The company name, okay, podcast. So there's an entertaining mixed bag. The one that we want to pay attention to is obviously this first one here, where you're ranking number 3 for your own name. What we should do to improve that is over time, get more links to your site for your name. And easy ways to do that, for example, would be if you have a network of sites that you can rely on, you can cross-link your content as it's created. So this is one of those interesting little things that we do on Trust Insights. In our network of sites, we have recent posts, and these are brought in from the different RSS feeds. So if you then go over to Marketing Over Coffee, you will then see the recent episodes there. You'll see my website, and you'll see Trust Insights. So it creates this network, this mesh of different links. And obviously now that your website is up and running, we're going to want to add this and create add one more site to the network. It's, gosh, for those people who are really old and have a lot of gray hair like me, back in the 90s, there was these things called web rings, and it was basically just a network of links of people linking to each other's sites. So you could jump into this community and see all these different sites. This is exactly the same thing, except it's been updated slightly for this century. But the concept is a really strong one, and it works. It works really well for making sure that your site gets visibility, and you're constantly building links to other relevant sites because they're all your site in a lot of ways. Okay, so we've now ascertained that you've got stuff there, and we know generally what you are and are not being found for. The pages part's not super helpful because obviously there's not that many pages yet, but we'll get you a blog going here soon.
Those are literally all the pages on the website.
Let's take a look at the sitemap. There is no sitemap yet, but in our SEO tools that we installed last week, the Yoast tool actually creates its own sitemap. If I could just remember where the URL is so I can plug it in.
Is the lack of a sitemap in Search Console one of the reasons why I am showing up number 3 for my own name?
No, it's because the golden standard still is inbound links, and right now you just don't have hardly any. So getting more of those links to you is going to be of benefit to you. Okay. Well, you know what? Let's just.
And obviously, one of the things on our to-do list is an SSL certificate.
Yep. Okay, so there's your sitemap that's automatically generated from Yoast. Inside Search Console, we want to add this in. We want to add in your sitemap so that it is indexed, and when you make updates to your website, it will automatically register them. Awesome. We'll have to give that at least a day. Okay. Other things we can check. Okay, there won't be enough data for this yet. And your theme, well, you don't have any current errors, so your site still looks good on those fronts. Let's check for any. Yep.
And for the lack of data for the core Web Vitals, for those of you who may have missed it, we actually did do an episode dedicated specifically to core Web Vitals a couple of weeks ago. So you can find that on our So What playlist on our YouTube channel.
Yep. Okay. So Search Console is all set up. Now, this gives you effectively the basics of a website. But one of the things that you probably should consider doing is having some way for you to reach out to people, not just waiting for people to come to you. And the easiest way to do that is actually through email. So what we're going to have you do is we're going to install a newsletter service. There are many out there. This is one that a lot of folks who have been doing a lot of stuff with and very successful. It's called Substack. It's free. I believe it's free up to a certain number of subscribers. And then you can do a premium model where you charge people to subscribe to your email. And then obviously the vendor gets a cut of it as well. So let's go ahead and get you started with this. I'm going to skip your Twitter stuff right now, and we'll use your Trust Insights email address. We'll blindly accept the agreement that we probably should read. And for your bio, we're just going to blatantly steal straight out of your Twitter bio. And set a photo. And again, let's just borrow straight from Twitter. And continue. Okay. What do you want to call your newsletter, Katie?
I mean, for now, Katie's newsletter for the sake of this episode, so you don't have to watch us fumbling through terrible suggestions.
Okay. But folks who are watching, if you have a suggestion for a newsletter name, toss it in the comments just for fun.
Yes, please. Now, let me ask you this question, Chris. You know, when you are setting up in Substack, if I call it today Katie's newsletter, but decide that someone had a really good suggestion, can I change it down the line?
Absolutely. You absolutely can. The only thing that you really can't change is the URL itself, the subdomain.
Got it. Okay.
Okay. What's your newsletter about?
Podcasts and dogs and marketing.
Okay, great. Let's hit continue. We don't have a mailing list to import.
Nope.
Okay, so now you've got your sign up page here, the coming soon page. Let's go to your dashboard. And this is where you would write your newsletter. Before we go any further, one of the things that Substack does allow you to do that I think is super helpful is it allows you to tie in your Google Analytics account. Let's see if we can find that here. Community advertising. Okay, so Google Analytics. We're going to put in your tracking ID for your site. It should be, gosh, I can't read that closely. Let's bring it to the screen. UA 12705. Okay. Now, what this is going to do is anybody who visits your newsletter pages on the web now is going to see. You're going to see in your own Google Analytics account that those page visits as though it was your website, which is really helpful. This does not work with Google Analytics 4. It only works with classic Google Analytics. So as we were talking about last week, there's no rush to switch over entirely and only to GA4 because there's a lot of legacy stuff that isn't going to work with it.
Well, and do you think that down the line, as GA4 gets rolled out and more people start using it, then they'll start to incorporate some of these things?
Yes, I think that will eventually be the case. Okay, so your settings look like they're all good.
What is that danger zone at the bottom?
Oh, the danger zone allows you to delete your publication.
Oh, okay. Good to know.
But you get subscribers, you get some basic stats, you get your basic posts in here, things like that. It's nice. It's pretty decent. What we're gonna do is the home page to the site has we'll have the sign up form and things like that. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna just take the home page itself and we're gonna put that on your website. There's no way that I know of right now to easily embed it in your site. So we'll just have to go and let's just double check it. Yeah. It's just the link itself. So let's go back to your site. And where should we put this?
Let's
make it a menu item.
Okay. I was going to say either let's make a newsletter page or put it on the contact page.
Yeah, you know what? Let's do the contact page. Let's keep it simple.
Okay. Once for this, amazing newsletter that I have not yet thought about.
How frequently are you going to send your newsletter, Katie?
Oh, the pressure is
daily,
on.
definitely.
Let's say once a month.
Okay, so try a monthly newsletter here for updates about podcasting, dogs, and marketing. I'll link that up. And update. Great. You're ready to go, right?
I'm guessing no.
No. We've forgotten a critically important thing, which is that should be a goal, right? We want people to do that thing.
It's, and it's funny that like we're joking about this because it seems like, oh yeah, duh. But I think that these are the very common traps that we all find ourselves in is we do the setup once. We're like, okay, we have thing, but then we start adding onto it and forget to go back to the initial infrastructure. And then 6 months down the line say, how come I don't have any of this information?
Exactly. So here's the catch. This goes somewhere else. This does not live on your website. And even though it goes to your Google Analytics account, because your analytics account is not set up for multiple domains, it would look functionally the same as your homepage. So what we need to do is instead treat this as an event in Tag Manager. So let's go ahead and create a trigger. And we're going to call this newsletter signup. And we're going to trigger on clicks on links. I'm going to trigger on some links. And we're going to be looking at the click URL contains katerivera.substack.com. So anytime somebody clicks on that link, this trigger will fire. And now we need to create a goal for that. It's going to be a universal analytics goal. This is going to be an event. This is going to be the category of newsletter. An action of subscribe. And we're going to set this to your GA account based on your newsletter sign up goal here and save that. And of course, the last part is we have to go and actually set up the goal itself. New goal. It's going to be an event. Letter. Subscribe. Save. Okay, so now you should probably hit submit and publish this Tag Manager container. Now, are we done?
I'm going to go ahead and guess no.
You're correct. We're still not done. And you're saying, why? Why are we still not done? Well, one of the things we talked about last week and we did last week was we set up Google Analytics 4. Remember that Google Analytics 4, all goals are now managed inside Tag Manager. So if you've got it set up and you're in there anyway, and you're building tags for your classic Google Analytics anyway, also take the time to build the Google Analytics 4 tag. You may as well. You're here anyways. Let's go ahead and set up our GA4 newsletter. Subscribe. By the way, I strongly encourage you to come up with some kind of common nomenclature for your goals so that you can keep them separate and you know which ones go to which instance. We're going to do a GA4 event.
And you're giving a very, very straightforward nomenclature of GA4. So calling your GA4 goal starting with the prefix of GA4 makes a lot of sense. Yep.
All right. Here's the nice thing. If you're doing your stuff in Tag Manager anyway, you can reuse the same trigger for both Classic and GA4. All right, so now we've got our event name declared there. Hit save and submit it. And now we go back to Google Analytics. Now we have to switch to GA4
Mhm.
to declare that as an event inside here. New conversion event. This, by the way, is, again, where having common nomenclature for like your goals and things that makes sense is super important, because you have to remember from application to application what things are. So now, anytime that GA4 receives that newsletter subscribe call from Tag Manager, it's going to treat that as a conversion. So now we are finally done.
I don't know. I feel like I don't believe you, but okay.
We're finally done with all of the configuration for both versions of Google Analytics, which, by the way, if you're going to be using GA4, you're going to be doing double the work for a period of time until things get caught up. But we're now in a position where we can start to track and report on this stuff. So question, is Google Analytics the best way to report on this stuff? Like, Katie, when you want to see how your website is doing, how are you gonna check in on it?
You know, for a long time, Google Analytics was the best way to check in on this stuff. But if you're looking for multiple data points, then it can get a little bit overwhelming. So you're clicking around and messing around with controls and filters. You know, it probably makes sense to have some kind of a dashboard, is, I'm guessing, the answer that you're looking for.
No, I actually legitimately wanted to see how you do stuff, because I know how I do things. I just pull stuff out of an API, and nobody else does that.
I'm a big fan of automated dashboards where you take the time to set it up and then it just runs on its own, and then you can check in once a day, once a week, once an hour, however, you know, active you are with it. So I'm a big fan of Google Data Studio. I have found it to be life-changing since they rolled it out, because the data automatically updates. And coming from a healthcare background where near real time, put in big, heavy quotation marks, meant, you know, at least a 30-day lag or sometimes a 2-year lag in healthcare data, having actual true real-time data is something that I thought was just a fantastic invention. So I'm a big fan of Google Data Studio. So what I would probably do for myself is I would set up a Google Data Studio dashboard and include each of the individual goals, just so I could sort of see at a glance how many people are doing any of the following goals at any given time for the time frame. And then I would probably take a look at things like, where are people coming from? And then what queries are people using to find my site, so that I can create more content around those things. So those would be the things that I would be looking for, given the simplicity of my website.
I totally agree. The one other thing that you might want to think of for the website itself would be, and this would really, with your personal brand, you got to build the audience first, and then once you have the audience, you can start, you know, trying to convert them and monetize them and stuff. And so one of the things that you might want to think about down the road would be a CRM, something like, you know, for example, HubSpot. The free version of HubSpot has good enough CRM, certainly for the low cost of zero, that allows you to ingest stuff like contact form data and store it, and to be able to track things. So like if you wanted to book, you know, manage speaking engagements, for example, that'd be a good system for doing that, particularly if you have, you know, anyone helping out with, like, you know, outreach and things like that. I think actually, why don't we save Google Data Studio? So the week of November 5th for So What, there's a bunch of conferences that I think I have to be doing stuff at. So maybe that week that you can demonstrate to folks how you want to build your own dashboard to monitor all this stuff. One of the things that I want to finish up with here is, we don't really have a good system right now for keeping an eye on what people are saying about you, for good or ill, right? And so the system I think that makes the most sense for where you are right now would be TalkWalker's free alerts service. So let's go over to alerts. And let's create an alert about Katie Robert. And let's do it as it happens, only the best results, and create an alert.
This, of course, is assuming that you want to know what people are saying about you.
You know, I think it's not a bad thing to have available to you. Okay. So Katie, you'll get that email and then you just have to confirm it. And then as people mention you, it's going to either send you an email or there's a way to subscribe to it in a blog reader like Feedly, for example, that allows you to have it all in one place. And that will obviously cut down on the amount of junk mail that you get on a regular basis if that was of interest. The way you do that is each one has its own RSS feed. So I'll just show you an example. This one I have here monitoring for, let's see what we got here. This is, oh, that looks like junk. Oh, that's Social Bakers. So Social Bakers website, here's a feed for Katie. So these are, Katie, these are a bunch of Twitter mentions about you. We have Marketing Over Coffee, and we have Trust Insights. Now, one of the really nice things about doing it inside of a blog reader, A, you didn't get 221 emails, right? nobody really wants that much email. But B, once you're done with them, you just hit mark as read and you clear it off. So that is the monitoring system that I think if we're building a personal brand, it's one of those things that is helpful to have. Could you bring this into Google Data Studio? Yes, with a lot of work. There are ways to connect it. It's not pretty. I would not recommend it, trying to shoehorn it in altogether.
I would imagine that the easiest, quote unquote, the easiest workaround for something like this would to bring those URLs into a Google Sheet and then hook up that Google Sheet into Data Studio. That to me would seem like the most straightforward way that doesn't involve any kind of custom code.
Yep, agreed. I think that's probably the best way to do it. So we're at the end of section 1 of you just getting the basic MarTech stack for your brand. What questions do you folks have about building out all this stuff? Anyone?
Well, I guess in lieu of having a CRM set up, so let's say for some magical, mysterious reason, I suddenly get an influx of people, subscribing to my newsletter or trying to contact me. Where does that data go? Where does that contact information go? How do I manage that?
So right now that goes into Substack. So Substack is where that lives, where you go into your subscribers and see, who has subscribed to your newsletter, and then you can export some of this data as well if you wanted to. Again, later on, if you wanted something more,
sorry, go ahead.
Later on, if you want something more sophisticated, that's where a system like HubSpot would come in handy.
Now, what about people who use the contact form? So on our website, we have the contact form wired up to our CRM system. But since for my personal website, I don't have a CRM system, where does that data go aside from my email inbox?
Currently, it only goes to your email inbox as literally, I believe, the only place it goes. Let me just double check that, because some plugins do store the data locally, which comes with its own risks and challenges as well.
So meaning I would theoretically be able to go into the admin section of my WordPress site and export that data from the form?
In theory.
In theory.
If we could get your freaking website to work at all.
I mean, it's a good thing it's not that important to me right now. Someday it might be, but as of this moment, I think it's a really good example of a very basic, straightforward website that someone just needs to stand up in order to demonstrate that they are a real person. Which is half the battle on the internet.
So the answer to that question is it does not store that information on your website. So if you don't get the email, you don't get the email. It's just gone. I would actually say, like, if this was going to be something you're going to invest some time in and you expected to get some growth out of, look at a plugin like Gravity Forms or something that will cache the data locally so that it's stored, so that if something happens or your emails from your website all get moved to your spam folder or something, you've got a backup copy somewhere. I mean, we even do that with our website. Even with a CRM, we maintain a secured backup copy locally in case something happens.
That makes a lot of sense. And I'm guessing that might be, if I were setting this up myself, that would probably be a mistake that I would make without realizing that I'm not capturing that data anywhere. And one could argue that people contacting you through your website is some of the most important data that you could be collecting.
Exactly. So choose your technology well.
What about you, John? Any questions? Any observations?
No, it's solid. It's funny. We just hit all the classic roadblocks, you run into as you're trying to string this stuff together. It's always, you think it's going to be so straightforward, and there's always another gotcha that you have to run off in Google to get it done.
Exactly. Okay, folks. So in the next couple of episodes, we're going to be looking at some additional monitoring and things like that, and some content curation things, and of course, how to set up that Data Studio dashboard. So if you're not already subscribed to our YouTube channel and stuff, be sure that you are, and a bunch of other things. Thanks for watching. We'll talk to you next time. Thanks for watching today. Be sure to subscribe to our show wherever you're watching it. For more resources and to learn more, check out the Trust Insights podcast at trustinsights.ai/TI podcast and our weekly email newsletter at trustinsights.ai/newsletter. Got questions about what you saw in today's episode? Join our free Analytics for Marketers Slack group at trustinsights.ai/analytics for marketers. See you next time.